welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Virginia Gentleman Podcast. My name is David Shepard. I'm a Substack writer, conservative, political activist, Virginian, author. And you're seeing this site, you're seeing this broadcast if you've got my Substack subscriber or on YouTube. We're now on YouTube. And I'm joined, this is our second episode, and I'm joined with Phil Hamilton, a friend of mine and a great Virginian. Phil is a former member of the Virginia House of Delegates. He served from 1988 to 2009, 2008. I guess that's right, Phil.
Well, 2009.
Okay. And so Phil represented Newport News, and Newport News is a great town. I've been there once, at least once, and it's the home, I understand, of Ella Fitzgerald. I had a friend, Ella Fitzgerald, so she said Ella Fitzgerald from Newport News. For those of you that may not know or are new to the show, which is probably a lot of people, this is just sort of like a weekly wrap. And I'm not going to focus too much on just my columns, although I may mention my columns for the week. But Phil and I are going to discuss the news of the day or of the week. And I will also point out that we're both Virginians, and so occasionally we'll nerd out and start talking about Virginia politics or Virginia law and stuff. So we'll try to keep that to a minimum, but that'll be the other thing that's a personal interest to us. And I just want to say on a personal note, I wanted to point something out. This microphone is sort of a cherished family possession. My father was in broadcasting in the 60s and 70s, and this microphone was sort of special to him. And Phil, I know nothing about technology, nothing, but I've learned how to take this old mic and hook it up to my computer in the podcast. Now, if people can't hear me right now, then obviously I failed. But if you can hear me, then I successfully set this up. And the microphone was willed to my father by an engineer at WTOP in Washington. Because it has some sort of historical significance, not just because my father used it, but also it was used by Edward R. Murrow at least once. Murrow was the famed newsman with CBS. And my father, Murrow became famous for the coverage of World War II during the Blitz. Most people and reporters had left England, and Murrow stayed behind with some CBS folks. And America got to hear about the war and what was going on through Murrow's reporting. And I think his famous tagline was, "This is London." And so he would tell about the Blitz and what's going on. Well, my father in the 60s got a job with WTOP in Washington. Murrow's in New York, the old veteran. But the CBS News executives thought Murrow wasn't sounding so great. So they contacted the chief engineer in D.C., WTOP was Lamar Allison. And they said, "Could you get Murrow a better mic? He's not sounding good. So we're sending him down to you." So Allison got a whole bunch of different mics and tested Murrow on different mics. And apparently this was one of the ones that he tested Murrow on. And my father was a big Murrow fan and always wanted the mic. And I think he would cajole and pester Allison, "Oh, I'll buy it from you. And Allison said, "Don't worry. One day when I die, I'll will it to you." Well, years later, Allison died and he remembered. So my father got the mic. So I was able to hook it up. So sorry for the long intro on that, but I just wanted to mention that I had the mic and put it to use. But I think of all my father's possessions, this may have been his favorite. So
That's a great story, David. Great story.
And who knows, maybe it's going to be like a Twilight Zone episode where whenever I use the mic, I sound like Edward R. Murrow, but I doubt that with the faint sounds of bombing in the background. Well, before we start, or as we start, I just want to mention a couple bits of good news I thought today from the morning papers. Number one, inflation down to 2.1%, which is the lowest it's been since, I think, March of 21. So since Trump has come to office, we've seen it go from 2.6, I think 2.4, now down to 2.1. So that's the good news. And if you think about it, Trump was elected, I think for two key reasons, more than that, but two key ones were securing the border and dealing with inflation. So he's made great progress on those two. So that's a positive. And then the second bit of positive news, I would say, would be the Supreme Court ruling that Trump was in his rights to strip temporary protective status over 500,000 migrants, which Biden let in. So those are two bits of good news. And I don't know, Phil, if there's anything else that you could add in terms of good news or second those things in terms of the news for conservatives and for America this week.
Well, the good news for me is that gas prices have dropped at the gas station where I fill my cars up, down to 288, and I consider that an accomplishment as well, because gas prices were one of the things that were fueling the inflation increase that we saw over the year. So, it's going to take time. Nothing's going to happen overnight, and I think slow, steady progress is going to be more solid progress. And I was not aware of the news, so I appreciate you sharing that with me. Also, David, I want to thank you for inviting me back. I was, to be honest with you, I was very surprised at the second invitation, but I was also surprised at the number of people that contacted me having seen this on YouTube.
Oh.
And they were very, very complimentary of what you had put together. And kudos to you, David. Good job.
Well, thanks. But yeah, you're going to be the bigger draw than me. Nobody knows me. So you had all those good years in Richmond, so people know you. But yeah, I think with inflation coming down, it's interesting. I'm not an economist, but it just seems to me that so much of inflation deals with energy, because everything is shipped and everything is trucked, and everything in your store came from somewhere and had to be driven in. So when you get energy costs down, it's the best thing to tackle inflation. So I think it's really pretty simple, and we're getting energy prices down. Your 288 sounds good. I'm in Northern Virginia, and I don't think we're have anything quite that good. I've seen 290, a little over 290, so that's good, relatively speaking, for us.
Yeah. I was pleased.
Oh, what was that?
I was pleased at the price.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. No, that's good, because if you think about it, I mean, that's more money out of your pocket, and we fill up all the time, so that makes a big difference. And especially for me, when I travel around a good bit for selling my books, it really affects whether I made money or not. Because if I've got to go to Madison County, Virginia, or even somewhere in Fauquier, and the gas prices are high, well, that makes a difference. So the other thing we were talking about that's in the news deals with Harvard. And it looks like they're fighting Trump pretty hard on, the foreign students, on the money that we give to Harvard. I guess Trump doesn't want to keep giving them a blank check. And the other thing is, and I want to get your point on this, because we have the similar situation in Virginia in terms of colleges, in-state and out-of-state tuition. Harvard's bringing in a lot of foreign students. I think the reason they're doing that is those students end up paying more money. So there may be the financial incentive. And I'll just say this, and I'll turn it over to you. Harvard, apparently it's over 30% of their students are foreign. And many people, myself included, think that's a little too high, because you want to give those slots, if you can, to American students. And so maybe the percentage ought to be more like 15%. I don't know what you think of that.
Well, back when I was in the legislature, there was a big issue over the amount of out-of-state students, not so much foreign students, but out-of-state students, because out-of-state students paid about 125 to 140% of the cost of tuition. Yeah. And because the in-state students were getting somewhat of a break. And Delegate Jack Reed at the time, he put in legislation to actually limit the out-of-state enrollment at state colleges and universities to 15%. Now, that legislation didn't pass, but it sent the signal. And so a lot of the colleges, like UVA, William and Mary were the two that come to mind, made a more conscious effort to lower, because they were at about the 30% range back in the mid-90s and things. And they made a more conscious effort to lower their percentage of out-of-state students. I don't think they ever got it down to the 15%, but they got it down significantly to where it didn't become the issue for Delegate Reed that it had once been. And so that is true. It's a financial incentive to have the out-of-state, or in Harvard's case, the out-of-country students paying full freight and then the American students, paying only $90,000 a year to go there. So I do think that's a part of it. Apparently, they continue to find various grants that the federal government has been providing to Harvard over the years, and I think the last total number that I heard is that it was like $5 billion that Harvard was getting annually from different types of grants and things of that nature. But with the foreign students specifically, I don't know how any college or university thinks that they're in charge of American foreign policy. Those students are here not on a Harvard student visa. They're here on a United States student visa. And so it seems reasonable that whoever the president is, that they have more control over the student visa program than an individual college or university. So I think he's well within his rights to do that. The sense that I've gotten is that if he's willing to work something out with Harvard, but from Trump's perspective, the anti-Semitism that's going on there and the lack of effort to try to curtail it, there seems to be conflict. Instead of trying to create a win-win situation for both Harvard and the whole student visa issue, Harvard wants to dig in and fight, and Trump's a fighter. I don't know what the end result in that would be, but I'm not so sure that I support all of the federal taxpayer money going not just to Harvard, but to any of the colleges and universities. And Harvard, particularly with the $53 billion endowment, what do they need federal taxpayer money for?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I agree. That doesn't. And then they get all snippy about the feds demanding them they do certain things. Well, I mean, we're paying you. I mean, you're getting federal money. And if you've got the 53 billion they're sitting on, why would they need federal money? So, yeah, I think it's a real legitimate point that Trump makes. Why are we giving you this money? And even Trump has suggested maybe taking that money and putting it to other schools like trade schools and things to help people learn to build things, build rockets, build robots, build all kinds of other things for the future. So the one thing I'm wondering, though, with Harvard is they've got a lot of people in powerful positions. And, when these judges rule, I haven't looked this up yet, but when these judges rule in favor of Harvard in a couple cases, I wonder if they went to Harvard. In other words, a lot of the judges, a lot of the members of Congress, I'll never forget, and this seems like a little point, but it's some reason stuck in my head. There was a senator from, I guess, North Dakota, a Democrat, kind of the moderate Heidi Heitkamp. She was there for Trump's first 2 years. And I remember she opposed, I think it was Kavanaugh, on the grounds that he went to one of the Ivy League schools, and Heitkamp, and I don't know if this was like a populist appeal or whatever, but she says, you know what, we ought to look at appointing Supreme Court justices from other schools outside the Ivy League. And I must say, I thought that was interesting point she made. I think she's probably right. But anyway, disproportionately, I think Harvard's got a lot of power, so that may be part of it as well. But the other case of the court this week would have been the trade situation, the tariffs, where you had a court in New York, I think it was New York, somewhere in the Northeast, shot down Trump's Day of Liberation proposal and said that it's illegal to have these tariffs. Now, hours later, another court then stayed that and blocked that decision. But that's a case where you're talking about the courts getting involved in what is foreign policy. Now, I do think that Congress should have the power in tariffs. I agree. But the reality is over the years, they've ceded power to the executive branch to negotiate tariffs. So they've really done that. I think it's probably a mistake, but they've already done it. So now Trump is involved in these negotiations. I don't think a court should be stopping his negotiations and saying, "Oh, you can't have these tariffs." But
I agree with you. And yes, the power to levy taxes and impose tariffs in the Constitution is a power of Congress. But as you stated, and stated correctly, over the years, Congress has ceded that power and authority to presidents over the years. It was interesting in the first term, Trump imposed a lot of tariffs on China. And there was a lot of gnawing and gnashing of teeth over that and the negative impact it was going to have on our economy, which never occurred. Well, Trump wasn't reelected in 2020, so the new administration could have come in and removed those tariffs. But they didn't remove any of them. And Congress never raised, the issue of tariffs. And so we've got this billions and billions and billions of dollars of trade deficits with other countries around the world. And I do believe that philosophically, what's wrong with fair trade? I mean, and I would consider a fair trade, if you're going to tariff me 10%, I'll tariff you 10%. If you want to go to 50%, I'll go to 50%. That doesn't seem to be unreasonable. And ideally, it would be 0% both ways. And I understand that after World War II, we wanted to help Europe rebuild and this, that, and the other. Well, the rebuild has occurred. And I think it's time to either eliminate the international tariffs, which is foreign policy. Again, it's between foreign countries to each other, or at least the reciprocal tariffs. And I don't see the problem with that. What I do see a problem with is the deficits. I think we're at like $293 billion of deficits to China. Well, what do you think China's using the $293 billion of extra money for? It's not to help the citizens of China. If you look at their defense spending, I mean, they're ratcheted up. They're building ships and they're building planes and they're increasing the size of their military much faster than the United States is. So in essence, we're funding their military buildup. And it just doesn't make any sense to have that level of deficit spending through the trade imbalance.
Yeah, and I would also say with China, and I'm generally a free trader and all, but I think in the case of China, they are vulnerable in the sense that they got to keep exporting all this sort of stuff. And it's really sort of cheap. I think people buy these Chinese products, not all of them, but because they're cheap. And if they have the high tariffs and they're no longer cheap, well, it's not that big of a deal. People will stop buying that. I got this thing, I've had experience with other Chinese products, but it's I don't want to be too personal, but it's for the teeth. It's a Miracle Smile toothpick, a water pick sort of. And it broke like 2 weeks later. But I don't know how to get my money back. There's no way really to get my money back. But the point is that a lot of these Chinese products people buy them because they're cheap. And so therefore, I think we could probably have high tariffs on China and be okay. So that's just my thought.
Yeah. So I commented on somebody's post about the tariffs and they said, price shop. I mean, don't you price shop? I don't price shop. I walk into a store. If I see something I want to buy, I buy it. I don't look to see if it was made in the USA, if it was made in Italy, if it was made in Vietnam, or if it was made in China. If I want it, I buy it. And if I don't want it, it stays on the shelf. And I do think that the concept that tariffs are going to drive up the prices and inflation is going to go crazy. Well, we've had the tariffs, and you reported at the start of this show that inflation had dropped to 2.1%. So apparently the fear mongering that went on over the tariffs, and I know that Trump has moderated the rates from when he first introduced it, has not occurred. And let's just settle down. Everything doesn't have to be a crisis, and it's always presented as the old Chicken Little, the sky is falling. It's not. America's strong, America's resilient, and from my experience in the shopping that I do, my out-of-pocket expenses are going down at the supermarket, at the gas station, and I haven't changed my buying habits.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing is about prices when they go up, you never know what consumers might do. Consumers could do different things. So there's no guarantee that it has to be inflationary. So And I will also say that Celeste pizzas are down to under $1 now. I saw that the other day at
Okay.
Giant, so that's good. The other thing to point out is Elon Musk's last day as a temporary employee. I think he did a great job with Doge. Came up with some great ideas. But the media's kind of giving him a rough time and hounding him out of office. But I just think it was something that was necessary, a Doge type of thing. We go all the way back to Clinton before we had anyone really looking at government waste. So I
Right.
praised Elon Musk for that. I thought he didn't need it, as Trump said in the press conference today. You know, Musk didn't need this, but he did it for the country. He wanted to go after waste and fraud and abuse. And now, of course, Congress has to approve all of this, so it's not a done deal. But let's hope and pray that it gets done, that they codify it. But I don't know any of your thoughts on the Musk experience.
Well, it's interesting. I would agree that having an outside organization, whatever, come in and look at the inefficiencies of the federal government. And any organization as large as the federal government is going to have inefficiencies. Although I've noticed on Facebook a number of people claiming, oh, there's no waste, there's no fraud, there's no abuse. Well, I saw a story today about the $66 million food stamp scam that 5 or 6 people just got arrested for participating in. Well, that sounds like fraud to me. And it didn't happen since just January 20th of 2025. It's been going on, the investigation's been going on for a number of years. Any organization as large and as complex as the United States federal government is going to have waste, fraud, and abuse because human beings are the ones working in it. But I think it was something that needed to be done. He came in and he made claims that he thought there could be $2 trillion in savings. I like somebody that comes in with a big vision. They're criticizing him because, oh, he's only been able to identify 175 billion. Well, at 175 billion, if you were to break that out to all the taxpayers in the United States, federal taxpayers, that's over $1,000 a person. I'd take $1,000 a person for what Elon Musk and Doge has done. The bigger problem, we've got to get a handle on spending. As I mentioned with the deficits on the trade imbalance, the deficits in our federal spending with what we spend and what we take in, I mean, we're at $37 trillion of debt. You want to talk about an existential threat to the United States? You can't keep going on like that. At some point in time, people that are owning this debt, they could call it in. Then what do we do? I mean, our debt payment is behind Medicare, Social Security. It surpassed defense spending. Now, with this new bill, defense spending might pass the debt payments that we make annually, but it's $1 trillion a year in debt payments. We're getting absolutely nothing for that $1 trillion. So I think we've got to start to get serious about the spending. And the whole thing about oh, we're cutting Medicaid and this, that, and the other. I actually looked at the legislation, and there is a list of exceptions in there. They're talking about pregnant women are going to lose their Medicaid coverage. Well, not if you read the law. The law specifically has an exclusion for pregnant women. It has an exclusion for people that are medically determined to be not physically or mentally capable of meeting the work provisions. So those protections are there. But I understand, the nature of politics today is all the fear mongering. I would encourage people to go read the legislation for themselves and don't listen to any outside media network. Read the legislation yourself, and you'll be surprised at how what you've heard, no matter what networks you're listening to, might be a little bit different from the actual wording of the legislation. And I had a little back and forth with someone who had sent out a meme of what looked like a pregnant woman on her knees scrubbing the floor and had a broken arm, saying that this person was going to basically lose their Medicaid benefits. That's what prompted me to go look at the legislation. And once I pointed that out, the attitude changed a little bit. But so much of what happens and what you hear or see on the from the media, both sides, might not be exactly accurate according to what's written on the page. And that's what the law is, what's written on the page.
Well, yeah, and remember, inflation was supposed to get us with Trump's inflation, and of course it didn't materialize, and now the cuts are supposed to kick out, hurt seniors and stuff, and I don't think that'll materialize it either. You're just talking about waste, and we need to go after. But like I said, even if you accept the bottom line that Musk only found 175 billion or whatever in savings, that's a lot of money. So kudos to Musk for doing it, and
I agree.
We need to follow through, though. Hopefully, it'll follow through with Congress to enact all these things.
Well, the other thing, David, I know a lot of people are upset that those cuts aren't in the one big beautiful bill or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But there's another bill that can be passed on simple majority, and that's rescission.
Yeah.
And the rescission bill could be a separate bill that just has cuts in it.
Yeah.
And it only would need a majority in the House. I mean, in the Senate, would need the 60 vote margin in the Senate. It's my understanding that that's also a piece of legislation that's going to be forthcoming. The rescission bill that's going to rescind a lot of the spending that's going on. Okay. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And like I said, I do think we're resilient, and I think the country will come through this, and I think we'll be better for it. We'll have a stronger military. We'll have a stronger economy, and all won't be perfect, but we're working towards a more perfect union.
Well, yes, and I think Musk has got off to a good start, and I think we were really blessed to have him taking a look at this because, it's really just something that, and I never understood. I grew up in Fairfax County, and this is a federal town and all, but the power that the protections that people have working for the federal government, whereas in the private sector, if the company's not performing, they're getting rid of people pretty quick. But I don't know why people thought the federal government was performing well. I don't know why they thought that. And things like USAID, that should have been going a long time ago, and NPR funding, and so much of this. I know it's a drop in the bucket, but still, you shouldn't be wasting any money. And my father used to say that if they can't cut that, they can't cut anything. And in some ways, I worry that he may be right. If you can't get rid of the simple stuff like this. But we'll see. Right. The other thing is, there's more news than I thought, it looks like. The other thing is auto pen stuff. Apparently, Congress is looking into that in terms of whether Joe Biden, what he actually signed. And that's interesting. Trump commented on it earlier. I don't think they should try to subpoena Jill Biden or anything like that, but it would be curious to see. And I don't know myself. I'd have to try to look this up. Was actual legislation, was actual proclamations, executive orders, was any of that really signed with an auto pen? I just assumed, and I've seen pictures of Biden signing things, so I just assumed he signed all that. But I do think that would be something if it turned out that legislation was signed with an auto pen. I don't know if your thoughts on that.
Well, it's something that should be addressed. I mean, I'm like you. We don't need to relitigate the past, but if the auto pen, Congress needs to make a decision whether that's going to be a legitimate signature on official government documentation or not, and don't leave any gray area. If you're signing a bill, if you're signing an executive order, if you're signing a treaty, it's got to be a legitimate signature, not an auto pen signature. If you want to do the White House Christmas cards with an auto pen, have at it. But for legal, official government documents, I think the president ought to be the person that signs it. And if the president is not capable of signing it, that speaks to another thing called the 25th Amendment.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think if you auto pen it, that implies to me that you never read it. If you had at least signed it, that gives me an idea that you were physically with that piece of paper, and that there's a chance that you knew what you were signing. But we'll see. Historically, I used to have kind of an interest in historical autographs, and I was told that Jefferson Davis's autograph was probably signed by his wife. For some reason, she had the power to sign things for him. So an autograph collector told me that sometimes if you see Jefferson Davis autograph, it might have actually been his wife that signed it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that worked out that she's signing things for him, but well, those are some of the big stories, I think, of the week. Now, I did want to touch on, now that we have an opportunity to talk to you, because I know in the legislature, one of your big issues was education, and career-wise is education. And in Virginia, our laws take effect usually July 1st, I believe. But you wanted to mention a piece of legislation that's coming dealing with education and SOL testing, I believe. Ironically named SOL. But
Yeah.
you were telling me earlier about the bill. If you could just inform us on things I didn't even know about it.
Well, I didn't know about it either until I saw something on Facebook that someone had posted. It was House Bill 1957, and it dealt with making some significant changes to the SOL testing program in Virginia. And I would say that a lot of the changes they were making were very, very positive. I mean, one change was that the SOL testing was going to be limited to the last 2 weeks of a school year. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because I can tell you, when you were given SOL tests in the first couple of weeks of May, as soon as those SOL tests were finished, teachers had a month to try to keep the kids active and engaged. And that was tough, because for the kids, the school year was over if the SOL tests were done. So I thought that was a positive change. SOL tests were always scored on a 600-point system. Well, grades are always scored on a 100-point system. So that was another change, that in determining whether a student passed or did not pass the SOL test, it would be based on a 100-point system. I thought that was a positive. The one thing that did concern me about the legislation, though, was a little nugget that was in there that said a student's performance on the SOL test could account for at least 10% of their final grade. Now, the SOL tests are standardized tests. Students are not standardized. They are individuals. And having been in the legislature when the accountability movement came into being related to the standards of learning testing, there was a lot of concern about accountability in the first place. And because it was a standardized test, we knew that it was primarily there to kind of get a baseline on curriculum, on instructional strategies that might be working or might not be working, both in a school division or in a school or in an individual classroom. But it was not to target individual students. Well, now, if you put a provision in there that it may be at least 10% of a student's grade, I think you've added additional pressure to a test that really was more for a collective type of evaluation rather than an individual student evaluation. And I think making that 10% could be punitive for a lot of students. So rather than say it's going to be 10% of your grade, why not change that legislation, that language in the legislation, to say, if you pass the SOL test, you will get a 10% bump in your final grade. So then you've built in an incentive for kids to, A, take the test seriously and to do their best in making that. That was the only provision in that new legislation that I disagreed with, and I was surprised that it passed. I think it passed 62 to 37 in the House and 27 to 12 in the Senate. So it passed pretty strongly. That I would have loved to have known if there was any real significant debate about that concept, because I just can't imagine that being accepted back in the years that I served in the legislature, because we understood that the standardized tests, known as the SOLs, were never intended to target individual student performance. We'll see what happens. It does have it, while it passed, it will not take effect. That part of it, the grades anyway, will not take effect until the 26-27 school year. So next year, the students, their grades won't be impacted negatively or positively because of the results on their SOL test. But after that, unless the legislation or the law has changed, it could have a negative impact. And there's a lot of kids that just aren't good test takers, and you put that added pressure, it might backfire. And I wouldn't have supported the legislation there. I would have fought to change that language and to get it to be a more positive approach rather than a potentially punitive approach.
Yeah, I agree. I went to Virginia schools pre-SOLs. I mean, we still had to take our tests, but I was pre-SOL. But no, I was not a good test taker, and I'm not really a good student. I got out of George Mason with a gentleman's C, as they say. You remember that expression? They don't use that one anymore.
No.
Gentleman's C. Well, thank you. I don't know. We covered sort of the big topics, I guess. I hope you're going to have a good weekend. We'll do this again, but hopefully you'll get some golf in. I know you're a big golfer.
Well, I've got golf scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, so I think that constitutes the 2 days of the weekend. So the weather's supposed to be better. We're expecting a storm to come through here tonight, and the course is already pretty saturated. But after that storm goes through, it looks like a week of sunshine, hot and humid days. So I'll get through it.
You're living the dream. I remember, I think last year, pretty much every time I checked with you, you were on the golf course. So you're
David,
living the dream. That's good.
I've got no complaints. God's been good.
I can't play it. I used to play putt-putt golf, but I would always lose. And it could be emasculating too, because I'd take a date, I'd play putt-putt golf with her, and she'd beat me. So it was like, I'm really not good at this. Well, let me just say that this is our second show, and you had mentioned, I think you had a good idea. If people are on my Substacks, they can always send a question, and I think there's a way on Substack to submit a question. And then in the future, for the next few episodes, we can take some questions from the writers, from the readers. I think that's an excellent idea. And I'd also make a pitch for anyone watching this to hit like. Also, join my Substack at davidshepard.substack.com. And even people can contribute. Everything's free and open, but if you'd like to contribute, people do. And I think it's cheap on Substack. It'd be like $10 a month, which is not even a fast food meal. So please help me out to keep this going. And Phil will be here next week talking about the latest news. And, what a difference a year made. I think last year for us, politically, all the news was bad. And now most all the news is good. So knock on wood, we keep that up with Trump. But
well, David, again, I appreciate the invitation and look forward to being with you whenever you want to have me.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll make it a regular. And I think, the other thing is we didn't know what necessarily to call the podcast, but I think we're going with the Virginia Gentleman's Podcast. I guess Dave and Phil sounds too much like a morning talk show. So maybe we'll go with Virginia Gentleman. Virginia Gentleman was the name of my blog, which I started back in the days of Bob McDonnell when he ran. And Sean Kenny and Vince Harris were doing blogging, and I got into blogging, and so I started it then. I haven't done anything with my blog, but now I've turned to Substack to write. But
I like that title because you are a Virginia gentleman.
Yeah, and I always thought, because the bourbon distributor is Virginia Gentleman, and I always thought I'll know I've arrived. I know I'll be something when the whiskey company, the bourbon company, sues me. But they never sued me, so I guess I'm unknown. But, well, thank you, and thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll be back at you next week, and this will be posted on my Substack and YouTube. So not live streamed, but it should be up right after we finish. All right, well, Phil, thank you. Hope all's well in Newport News, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, David.